So hello, today I'm at St Andrew's Church in South Shoebury in Essex, and I'd like to talk to you about the history of the church and the village itself. Now, Shoebury is a suburb of Southend-on-Sea, which was made a city in 2022, so not long ago. It's 4 miles from Southend-on-Sea and 2 miles from Great Wakering. Now, Shoeburyness has urban development to the north, and to the south we are looking at the Essex coast, which runs for 6 miles. The elevation is 7 metres or 23 feet in old money. Today's population is 22,000. Now, Shoeburyness is divided into south and north, so today we shall concentrate on the south. Now just look at this fine weather we have. Now the current temperature is around 10 degrees and we've got a light breeze, and it's a lovely February day. Now the history here is extensive. In 2014 archaeologists surveyed the area known as Danish Camp, which we're looking at just in the distance there. And they discovered Neolithic and early Bronze Age pottery and post holes from around 2000 BC. During the Iron Age, the settlement here was fortified with ditches and ramparts. Archaeologists even found a war chariot harness ring dated 50 BC, and this would allow a pair of horses to pull such a chariot, and it's one of only 10 found in Great Britain, so incredibly rare. Now, interestingly, the Romans seem to have abandoned the ramparts here. In the 1890s, 2 Roman kilns were found here, along with burials. It's in the Saxon period that Shoeburyness becomes of great national importance. Now, for in the 9th century, Vikings and Frankish pirates would attack this very coast, and Alfred the Great and the Saxons would battle against one Viking in particular. His name was Halstein the Dane. Now, Halstein was described in 896 as being fierce, mightily cruel and savage, pestilent, hostile, given to outrage, a death-dealing warmonger general. Now, Halstein and his Viking raiders had terrified the Mediterranean with his fleet of 62 ships. His forces would move on to Breton, the coast of France, and then on to North Africa, and Halstein would acquire slaves to sell in Ireland. And then in 892 he would lead, or he would head for England and its coast. Now, after skirmishes along the south coast, Halstein would head for the fortified camp at South Benfleet, only 11 miles from here. And whilst on a further raid, South Benfleet was counter-attacked, capturing Halstein's wife, sons and his ships. Now, it was at this point where Halstein would set up camp here in Shoeburyness at the old Iron Age fort. And it's been called the Danish camp ever since. It's virtually where we stand now. Now, I'd just like to point out that this is the old Royal Artillery gunnery fortifications used for the guns that they used. And we'll talk about that a bit later. And here we have two ships that head off into the channel that goes into the Thames of London. Now, Halstein would continue his raids, and by 896 the old Viking would disappear into legend. Danish camp would become agricultural land for the next 953 years, until 1849, when it would become the Shoebury Garrison for the Royal Artillery, where we stand right now. So you can see now we're pretty much up to the high tide mark. Now, Shoeburyness was named after the hill or peninsula which jutted out into the sea, resembling a nose. Now, Robert, son of which March, was the Thane here in 1066. And he was a Norman noble who settled in England in the days of Edward the Confessor. Now, Robert was a favourite of the king. And look closely at the Bow tapestry, and next to Harold and Edward you will see Robert. Now, in 1066 the manor here had 100 sheep, 12 pigs and 4 oxen. It was quite a small affair. Now, Robert Fitzwark would fight alongside William the Conqueror at Hastings and he would be rewarded with the first title of Sheriff of Essex. Now his son Sweyn would take over the manor and was titled Sweyn of Essex and the sheriff. He would go on to build Rayleigh's Castle and establish trial by combat there. The two parties would slog it out until their dispute in combat was finished with only one winner. Now we're standing in the old garrison barrack blocks, I guess. Now Sweyn would own many manors, including Prittlewell, where he would build Prittlewell Priory in 1121, and part of this still survives to this day. And it would be Sweyn's son Robert who would donate Shoebury Manor, its lands and title to Prittlewell, and would give the Adwardson to St Mary's Church, to Prittlewell Priory. Now Thomas Becket, the Archbishop, confirmed this before he was murdered in 1170. And here we can see how the old development of the barracks is incorporated into the new development. So now the beach goes back into public domain, so the MOD allow us to go on this section here. Hello mate. Oh, a friendly little dog. Now going back to Prittlewell, the monks there would conduct their business and prayer until 1537, when we got the dissolution of the monasteries. So they would have been a big part of Shoebury. Now the last prior was Thomas Norwich, and he would sign over to the crown, who was Henry VIII, Henry VIII, sorry. And the new owner would be Richard Rich. And his wife, Elizabeth, would have 6 sons and 10 daughters. Can you imagine that? Now, Sir Richard would be Chancellor and Solicitor General to the King. And the male line of his family would be lords here until there were no more males. Now we can see a huge amount of rocks that they put along the beach there to stop the erosion, because Essex does have a serious problem with coastal erosion. And here we have a beach. So as you can imagine, this is a very popular beach in the summertime. You can see the boatyard here. Guess a lot of these boats are getting prepared for the summertime, springtime. Now we're going to look at that structure briefly that's behind that boat. Now we're looking at the Coast Guard. Now if we turn the camera around, we can see this boom. Now this boom's, we're moving forward a bit in history, but this is the boom that was designed to stop submarines. World War II. So it goes out a fair distance. I can't remember off the top of my head how far out it goes, but I seem to remember it replaced an earlier wooden one. So here we have South Shoebury's pub. It's an interesting one at that. Today it's called the Old Garrison, but in 1898 it was built as a military hospital. It was built and paid for by the public in memory of the 7 soldiers who died from an ordnance explosion. Now in 1909 it became the living quarters for the military nurses and would remain a hospital until 1947. Now from 1960 it would become a youth hostel, closing in 1976 when it became abandoned. In 1984, in its fourth incarnation, it became known as Captain Mainwaring after the TV show Dad's Army. Now the main character was always pronounced Captain Mainwaring, so in 2009 it would again change its name to the correct spelling. Now in 2009, to recognise the military history here, its name would change to the Garrison Arms, and finally in 2012, after a further refit, it would be what we see today, the Garrison Arms, or the old Garrison. So now we're at the entrance of Shoebury Garrison, now from 1854. This site was used by the Royal Artillery as a firing range for its heavy gunnery. During the Crimean War, the garrison would also become a school of gunnery, and the military here would test explosives, rockets and shells. We shall just have a little peep. This would be the guardhouse on either side. You'd be stopped by the sentry or guards, and I guess this would be the parade ground. As you walk around Shoebury, you realise just how much of a military village it would have been. And here a further gun. And here I found a notice board explaining the church, St Peter St Paul, which is Garrison Church, and where we've just been, the clock tower, barracks and parade ground. So now we have returned to the Shoebury Garrison Memorial. In 1885, a 6-inch shell being prepared for firing detonated, killing 7, including two colonels. Now a Major Bally walking close by was saved when a splinter from the explosion embedded in the book in his jacket pocket. It gives you an idea of the scale of these shells. I mean, compare that to my hand. Now I read that on the day of the funeral, every shop and factory closed in Southend District. This memorial was unveiled in 1985. That would be a century later.
Here. It's up here. Yeah, anyway. I'm thinking of where the coffee is sad story.
Now if we look here, there's a sign that it goes into the, explains about the history of the ranges of gunnery. Now we are looking at the coastal artillery. Now, this section of the garrison specialised in coastal artillery training. And we have I believe this will be the heavy firing battery, 1898. Now the garrison and artillery would continue until 1976. The old ranges and garrison land would be sold off and converted to housing in 1998. And today only the experimental ranges remain. So when you enter this area you'll see a red flag, and that will tell you that the range is alive. Today it's an excellent place for wandering around, walking your dog, running and so on. It's just a great place. This gives you an idea of the scale. So these are obviously new developments built onto the garrison land. And this is just one firing setup for the heavy guns. So now we've actually made our way to St Andrew's Church itself. So now we stand at St Andrew's Church, and St Andrew the man was born in Galilee in Israel. He was the brother of St Peter, and like his brother was a fisherman. It was Jesus that said he would make the brothers fishermen of men. Now Andrew had many legends connected to him. The Georgians believed that Andrew preached around the coast of the Black Sea. And in Cyprus, Andrew ran aground, the ship's captain being blind in one eye. Andrew struck a rock with his staff and healing water gushed forth, curing the captain's eye. And this would become Apostolos Andreas Monastery there. Now in today's Ukraine, legend says Andrew would make his way up the Dnieper River and place a preaching cross in today's Kiev. But long ago this was the land of Kiev and Rus, today's Belarus, Russia and Ukraine. Now Scotland also holds legend that relics of St Andrew were brought from Constantinople, today's Istanbul. In battle, the Picts and Scots fought against the Angles. The Scottish leader engaged in prayer on the morning of the battle in 832 AD. The clouds formed a cross shape, and ever since the Scots have used the cross as the national flag, and St Andrew is their patron saint. Today St Andrew is the patron saint of fishermen, fishmongers and rope makers. So St Andrew's Church, the walls are of ragstone rubble which comes from Kent, and the tower is made from flint rubble from the local fields. Now the dressings are also made from Reigate and limestone. Now we shall start with this lovely 15th century porch. And the old porch is timber framed with the middle king post and curved braces, and we'll have a look inside. Now if we look at the arch above the door, it looks like it's from a previous renovation not so long ago. On the left side you can make out the cross of St Andrew for Scotland. And if we move over to the right side, we can see the fish. I believe it's on the net. So we can just make out the initials SA. And you can see this timber's quite unusual when it's treated. You can see where it's all been refurbished. So if we make our way inside, now this is one of these churches that is open daily, which is a real treat. And this church has got a disability ramp, which is pretty useful. If you're in a wheelchair, a walking stick. So now we are looking at the south doorway, and notice the 12th century round arch. Now the outer order of the stone jambs has scalloped cushion capitals and fine Norman work indeed. If we go over to the east side, we can see where a repair's taken place. Now this section was replaced in the late 16th or 17th century. And if we look here, we've got a consecration cross. Now it's believed that this was carved 870 years ago. It's only 2 inches high and is set on the right hand side. So it's 870 years ago. So this would have been carved when the building was actually blessed. And we can just make out some of the original timber. So okay, let's make our way inside this lovely old church. Take my cap off. We shall go inside. We shall pan around till we can see what the view looks like through the south door. So we're now looking at the nave, which measures 34 feet by 19 feet, and it's 12th century. Now they've got some lovely modern lights here, and I'm just going to flick them on. Now we're going to look at the roof itself. Now the roof is 15th century, and the wall plates and 3 king post trusses are all 500 years old. Looks like a set of angel's wings, I think. Okay, we're going to look at the incumbents, that board on the wall. Now this shows the list of rectors, vicars, and priests in charge from 1267. Now the first rector was Peter de Passage, in 1267. Now in that year of 1267, the Second Barons' War would end. The barons agreed peace with Henry III. Also, the Statute of Marlborough law is set, and incredibly it still stands in statute law. That's 756 years, the oldest law of this land. So we go back over to the south wall. We've got this lovely organ, and I've got no information on it. but it's a fine pipe organ. I like the detail of the mirror for the organist. And beneath a table gives information on various things in the community. Now we shall walk over to the original north door. It's very tall. It's an undated door and it's described as a plain door, but just look at the heavy ironwork. Isn't that just great? The same is on the south door, I noticed. It's such a simple mechanism. Okay, we're going to make our way to the first window. Now this window is described as a scene of pilgrim's progress. Now a book, The Plain Man's Pathway to Heaven, was written by Arthur Dent, who was rector here from 1580. Now if you look, the two top panels are conflict and peace. And I found out this window is in memory of Montague Lambert of 1880, a major in the Royal Engineers who was loved and mourned by his loss from the engineers. We shall pan down. So on the left panel it's got doubt underneath, and the right one is deliverance. Now Major Lambert was born in France and would enter military service in Woolwich, London in 1854. And he would work his way up through the ranks of the Royal Engineers. In England, Malta and West Indies he served. Now on his return in 1880, the Major would instruct surveying at Chatham, here in England, where he would catch a cold. Now on the 30th of January, he visited the reverent wine of this very church, as he was to be married to his daughter. And sadly, the Major was taken ill of possible pneumonia and died. And this is a memorial to him. And at the very bottom, the illustration of the Pilgrim's Progress was placed in this church, in which he often worshipped in memory of Montague. And then it goes on to say, Major of the Royal Engineers, by some of those who loved and mourned him. Now if we go over to the south wall, we've got another window. Now I'm afraid I've got no information on this window, but we'll just have a quick look at it. Beautiful colours. It's quite hard to read the writing. And the right panel. Okay, we shall walk a little bit towards the chancel, and we're going to look at the memorial here. Now the top memorial is World War I, listing the 8 men who made the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom. And if we look beneath that, we have a brass memorial. And this is dedicated to Dale Knapping of 1878, and it was erected by the officers of the School of Gunnery of the Royal Artillery here. And Dale Knapping was quite an important character, I believe, of that time, much respected. Now, if we look to the right, we have a very unusual rood stair access, which is more or less complete. Now, this is 15th century, and the staircase, all original in stone. It's quite unusual to find in this condition. And if we pan down, we can see a stone head on the step, on the fourth step, I believe. Now, when I look this up, this stone carved head is 14th century. It's possibly a label stop. Could have been a dripstone to a lower ends of an arch, a window, or a doorway. We could just go past this pulpit. We can have a closer look. Now we can see the fine oak pulpit. I've got no information on this. You can make out the step there. Now, if we look behind the pulpit, we've got recesses. Now, these are 13th century, much altered. No history, but would have been of great importance. I've seen similar recesses which had squints to allow the congregation to look at the sacred altar. So my guess is here there would have been a hole, and that would have allowed the congregation to view the altar. And on the opposite side, there's another recess there. Let's just have a closer look. So this recess may well have been for a sacred relic of some sort. If we go over to the other side, now on the south window, we've got a south window. I've got no information, but it's a lovely window. Look at the work and the colours that have gone into this. So I take it that must be Moses with the 10 Commandments. Oh no, sorry, it's a crucifix, isn't it? Sorry. Ah, there you go. St. Andreas, St. Peter's. So we're now facing the chancel. Now the chancel measures 21 feet by 14 feet, and it's mid-12th century. Now I'd like to look at the chancel arch because it's most unusual. Now the arch is with two orders. The outer is moulded and the inner has chevron ornamentation. Now the chevron zigzag pattern was based on the Romanesque architecture, and it was popular across Europe and seems to have been of Islamic influence. Now, the early Norman Crusaders would tie into the date of this chancel, so it's possible that the fashion came over with them. Now, this arch would have been of great detail when it was first cut by the stonemasons. Let's try and move around. You can see the detail there. And from a different angle, gives you some of the idea of the detail carving. Okay, if we enter the chancel itself, I would like to look at the south wall. So in the south wall are two windows. Now the eastern window, which is on this side, is original, and the western window is a century newer. Now officially the doorway is considered modern, but it's the most beautiful arrangement. And you can see this lancet window is very defensive. Zoom in a bit. There. Look at that lamp, a lantern, it's fantastic, isn't it? So you can make out the original defensive windows set up there. Now if we look up, we've got a memorial up to the left side. Now the top memorial is to Mrs. Priscilla Kennett of 1772. Now when I looked up this year of 1772, all members of the royal family would require the king or queen's consent to marry, and I believe it still stands today. Also, the anti-slavery movement began with Lord Mansfield, the Chief Justice of England, who would not allow an enslaved person on English soil to be sent to Jamaica for sale. And this case was to change slavery across the British Empire and 13 American colonies. Now, if we look beneath, there are two more memorials. And these memorials are for Edward and Richard, both esquires. Now, an esquire belonged to the order of English gentry, below that of a knight, but above a gentleman, of considerable standing here in Shoebury. I've turned out the lights now to give you an idea of the aspect. So we can see another alcove here, not sure why, and another window. And again, you can see this is an original 12th century lancet window with Victorian glass. Must be I Am the Good Shepherd. Yeah. So if we look over to the east window, the biggest window in the church, a small memorial in the centre there. Now this memorial is to, if I'm not mistaken, William Cannon or a sergeant observer with the RAF and organist of this church. Now, I found out that Sergeant Cannon's aeroplane took off from Hemswell on a mine-laying sortie in the Elbe estuary and crashed on the Yorkshire moors in 1940, World War II. And it's most likely that it was his father who commissioned this ferry window. Okay, now we're going to make our way to the small west tower. You can see that the sun is going down. Now this beautiful 14th century west tower measures only 9 3/4 foot square. Now internally the stonemasons or the stonework is undivided, and outside you'll see it's built in 3 stages. I read that this is chalk on the interior. Okay, I shall put the lights on. There. So this is one of the favourite parts for me of this church. If we look here, we can see marks, graffiti. And everywhere you look, you can make out ancient graffiti. And you can see the stonemason's marks. If we come over here, it's more defined. You can just see where the mason has just knocked it out in the 14th century. We have a west window. I've got no information. But again, it's nice to see the way it's all put together. And the pattern on the window looks like trees. Now beneath the west window we have this font. Now this font is said to be modern, but I'm not so sure. Could find no history on it. Couldn't resist a little peep inside. It's quite unusual. It's a full immersion font and it's square. Okay, we shall make our way outside. It's like the way the light comes through the glass and catches the light reflects on the wall. Look at that, isn't that great? Okay, we shall make our way outside. Still a lovely sunny day. Okay, we shall look at the side of the nave. And on this window we can see some stone carvings. Now if we look here, we've got the new vestry building, but right up in the corner there is a core bell, like a stone, and it's described as a badly corroded dog head with pointed snout. Now when we're looking at bells of this structure, in 1749 2 of the 3 bells were blown down and sold in a great storm. Today's remaining bell is dated at 1847. So the chancel, although weathered and corroded and much battered, is one of the finest in stonework I've come across so far in Essex. Its stonework must have cost a fortune when first built, and I would have loved to have seen it when the masons finished the work. Now just to give you an idea, if we look at the window in the north wall of the chancel, you can just make out the elaborate carving in the top. Now this arch head is made up of 3 blocks, also decorated with chip carved crosses and rings. Now we're back onto the nave. And here is the original north entrance. You can just make out some of the architecture from the past on either side. Just about hanging in there, 2023. So we've gone full circle. Now we're looking at the tower, and if we look at the top battlement, which was added in red brick in the 18th century, we could just about make out the weather vane. It's obviously got a ship on it. And there is a finer view. So St Andrew's Church is very active within the community, and it carries out baptisms, weddings and funerals, and it's open most days. And I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you very much.